When a pregnancy is announced, it's the first question we ask. Is it a boy or a girl? But not everyone remains the gender they're born with. In America, there's a marriage with a twist.
Sometimes people are surprised when we let them know.
A sexual hybrid,
I honestly don't know if he's my son or my daughter,
is happy to be half male, half female.
I like my male part down there. I still date girls, and so it makes sense to keep it.
While in Germany, an Olympic athlete with the body of a Greek god was once a woman.
Also ich hatte immer das Gefühl, schon...
I always had the feeling, even before my puberty, that my penis was missing. I can't describe it any other way.
Also ich kann es gar nicht anders beschreiben.
Gender divides Western society.
We learn from a very, very early age that gender is a very, very important system, and the binary system of masculinity and femininity is embedded in almost every aspect of society.
We are beginning to question our strict definitions of gender, as 21st century medicine means the Great Divide is being breached as never before. He's the sort of man who turns heads. He's athletic, masculine, and would give many male models a run for their money. Balian Bushbaum is all man. Except for one thing. He used to be a woman. From early childhood, Balian Bushbaum feels like he was born in the wrong body.
Also ich hatte immer das Gefühl...
I always had the feeling, even before my puberty, that my penis was missing. I can't describe it any other way.
Also ich kann es gar nicht anders beschreiben.
For me, he never really was a woman. I mean, he probably experienced being in a woman's body, but not really thinking like a woman or experienced the real women's life.
Since his transition, there are no signs at all that he was ever a she.
Balian is a very interesting case study in that he is such a stunningly handsome, classically handsome man. And people can be quite unsettled by this when they learn that this body was originally female. When we live in a very patriarchal society, this idea of a female body not performing masculinity better than most men is actually quite challenging.
5 years ago, Balian was Yvonne, one of Germany's greatest pole vaulters.
Also Sport war für mich schon...
To me, sport was always a passion, but pole vaulting was my utmost passion. It lifted my heart. I got joy from the very motion of it.
At the age of 18, she won her first gold medal at the European Championships.
Und diese Wut, die konnte ich sehr...
In hindsight, I think my anger drove my success. When you feel uncomfortable in your own body, you feel rage. I was able to channel that rage into my sport.
So erfolgreich gewesen. So mit 13, 14, wo ich dann gemerkt habe, da beginnt eine...
Around 13 years old, I noticed my breasts were growing, and I felt like they didn't belong to me.
Gehört nicht zu mir. Okay, zweimal in der Woche Krafttraining.
So I began weight training. I do double the amount I was meant to, far too much for my body.
Auch von vielen Turnerinnen, wenn sie hart...
My intention was to stop menstruating and keep my breasts small. I wanted my breasts to look like pecs, not breasts.
Yvonne threw herself into her sport and it paid off. In the year 2000, she represented her country at the Olympic Games. But at the same time, she was unraveling inside.
Also ich hatte natürlich das Problem, dass der Sport auf der einen Seite...
On one hand, sport was my life. It made me happy. I was financially independent. On the other hand, I was like a train traveling in two directions.
At the peak of her career, Yvonne Bushbaum retired from the sport she loved.
Ja, ich wusste, dass ich alles aufgeben muss. Ich wusste...
I knew that I had to give everything up. There would be no more Olympic Games. But I also knew I had to let my body reflect what I had always been, a man.
No one knows exactly why people like Balian are born transgender. Scientists believe that a hormone imbalance in the mother's womb may be at play.
Aber viele Wissenschaftler sind sich einig, dass es
During the development of the embryo, there's the first push of testosterone that makes the brain masculine. That clearly happened to me, because in my brain, I was always a man. And then the testosterone pushes a second and a third time, which dictates you get your testes and a penis. I don't know where I was, but unfortunately, I didn't get that.
Determined to fast-track his gender change, Barlian seeks the latest in 21st century medical treatment.
In my personally medical past, I saw a lot of bad operations. So I was afraid for him because he wants to have the perfect results after the operation. So he was very pushy.
Barlian's ultimate goal is to erase any physical signs of his previous gender to avoid social stigma.
Also ich glaube, dass das Tabu eigentlich erst dann entsteht.
I believe the greatest taboo comes when people see the scars. It's so important to get a good surgeon, so you don't see the scars on the chest.
We are, of course, much more accepting of someone who doesn't rock the status quo. So if someone has transitioned beautifully and is performing seamless, beautiful masculinity or perfect femininity, we're much more accepting of that. That person has simply crossed over the bridge perfectly and is now inhabiting the gender on the other side of the binary.
The night before the big surgery, I had a lot of fear not to wake up in the morning. Because it was a big life dream for myself, and I know if I wake up in the next morning, I will start my life, my real life. I woke up after the surgery and I had a lot of bandages. 2 days later, the doc took them back and told me, could you hold them? And I said yes. So I felt in love. I had my penis in my hand and I thought, okay, now we're together.
Just 12 days after his cutting-edge surgery, Barlian Buschbaum is able to realize his lifelong dreams.
Es war zuerst die Toilette.
I used the toilet for the first time like a man. It's a feeling that I can't describe because it's something I had dreamed of my whole life. So that when I was allowed to do it, it was suddenly quite normal. And I thought, yeah, it should have always been like this.
In less than 2 years, Barlian makes a seamless transition from female to male.
Das hat sich von meinem Anzug.
Well, my style changed a bit because I had to hide more in the old days. Sometimes I'd wear 2 shirts instead of 1, just to conceal my breasts. And now I love to wear body-defining clothes, to wear a tie to a close-fitting shirt. I feel good now in the clothes that I wear.
Was ich anhabe, auch sehr wohlfühlen.
A daily chore for most men, shaving is now one of Barlian's pleasures.
Also nach meiner Veränderung habe ich eigentlich nicht.
After my change, it didn't take me long at all to get familiar with shaving. It already felt completely natural.
Barlian seems to have been gifted physically before transition, just as he is after transition. There are certain qualities that transcend gender. Very often, features that are feminine can translate into great beauty in men. Sharp facial features, things that are a little more youthful and childlike and boyish, which are characteristic of a woman's face, translates into a very attractive men's face.
Many transgender men who've gone before him can only dream of the kind of transition Barlian has undergone.
Ich kann in die Sauna gehen.
I can go to the sauna, and it won't occur to anyone that I wasn't born with a normal penis. For me, that was very important, that it looked right, that it functioned, and that I could sleep with a woman.
Sagen zwar, sie können es.
A state-of-the-art erectile device means a fully functioning sex life.
It was such a great gift to me, finally being with a woman. Sex was so natural, because when someone doesn't love their body, they have problems being touched.
Dann hat man damit Schwierigkeiten, dass man berührt
But
wird.
now I would say that that is a circle that has finally been closed.
Das ist ein Kreis, der sich geschlossen hat.
I can give love, and I can receive love.
Ich kann Liebe empfangen. Super. Ja, genau.
I think he has the right amount of feminine side inside of him that every woman probably hopes a guy would have. maybe it is easier for him to understand what it feels like to be a woman and what the hormones do to you.
Balian is now an athletics coach and personal trainer. He's also a poster boy for the modern transsexual male. Though changing sex remains taboo for many, his iconic looks have let him slip across the gender boundary, unnoticed.
Ich glaube, dass gerade dann, wenn jemand äußerlich...
I think it's even harder for those who don't pass well as a man or a woman. Then the taboo is even bigger, because others are scared of what they don't know. People need to be less superficial, because each person has something beautiful inside them, no matter whether they are a man or a woman or something in between. It doesn't matter.
Das ist so egal.
Today, more than ever before, people of all ages are putting their hands up and saying they don't fit into society's system of male and female.
I think Western society is moving past the idea that there are only two genders in the world, that it is coming to terms with the fact that nature abhors discrete categories, that everything exists on a continuum. We dealt with this in some way with the gay-lesbian liberation movement, and people are realizing now that gender is also on a spectrum.
Das Leben, was ich jetzt lebe, ist genau das Leben.
The life that I'm living now is what I always wanted, and I've always had the steering wheel in my hands. I'm the driver of my life, just like everyone else is. The only question is, do we trust ourselves? Are we brave enough to go where we really belong?
Der wir wirklich sind.
Since I was a little child, I've always loved sports cars. And it's not just sport cars. I love all types of cars.
The voice is deep and masculine. The body is tall and muscular. But all is not what it seems. Christina Bruce is half man, half woman.
I feel very comfortable with who I am. Unlike most transgender people, I am a little bit of a hybrid. I'm part guy, part girl.
Personal trainer Christina Bruce is part of a gender revolution.
Most people try to say, am I male or female? I'm not completely female, I'm not completely male. I'm a true hybrid, and I'm happy with it. If I have to put on a legal documentation, male or female, I do put female, but I'm happy being both.
As gender hybrid, Christina confronts one of our most basic systems of identity.
One of the things we really like is for everything to be neatly packaged and to be pigeonholed. And everything in society is organized around a gender binary system. So someone who is a gender hybrid is confounding all sorts of issues of identification and even issues of language. So what pronoun do we employ? How do we address this person? How do we relate to this person? And we'll feel very, very unsettled by it.
It's taken Christina 43 years to find the body that suits her. While her top half appears all woman, below the waist, it's a different story. For most of her life, Christina Bruce was a man called Christopher.
So far today, the only surgeries I've had is a little bit of facial work and breast implants and taking the hormones, and that's it. I don't really plan on this point on having any other surgeries. I get asked many times, are you going to have the final surgery or the bottom surgery? And no, I like my bottom. I like my male part down there. I still date girls, and so it makes sense to keep it. I don't need that to be happy.
While many transgender people make the transition from one sex to the other, Christina has stopped in the middle.
For some people, the fact that Christina has a penis will create a paradox, and indeed it does. It creates a blended physicality in terms of gender, but her identity may be purely female. Now, the reasons not to have surgery are many. Surgery is painful, it's expensive, there's risks and complications, and if you possibly can have pleasure from the genitals you've got, it makes a lot of sense to keep them.
But being half and half can be tricky.
One of the first questions I'll always get is, which bathroom do you use? Everybody has a hang-up.
I think it's obvious on which bathroom I should use, but it's more so when people hear me talk or once they actually get a look at me, they're just a little intimidated, I guess, at some time.
Christina is caught in a society that only recognizes two genders. But this binary system is not worldwide. In Indian culture, the Hijra have long been regarded as a third sex. Castrated males who dress in feminine clothes, they see themselves as neither man nor woman. In Samoa, a third gender is known as the Fa'afafine, little boys who are raised as girls in families that only have sons. The Bugis of Indonesia recognize 5 genders. There's the typical binary male and female, and transgender male and female. The 5th and most revered gender is the Bisu. They are said to embody both male and female, and interact with the spirit world.
We have science telling us that the belief in only two genders might have been just a cultural construction. We have historians telling us that the belief in a binary gender only started during the Reformation, and that for the 1,000+ years before then, from the Greeks forward, they believed there was only one sex. The sex was male, and they saw what we would call a female body as an inverted version of the male. Like all gender systems, whether it's 7 or 2 or 1, it's a made-up story that we tell about bodies. And whenever we have these stories, certain bodies don't fit.
As more transgender people in the West choose to live outside the binary gender system, society is having to find new ways to categorize them. In Australia, Norrie is the first person to be officially recognized as Gender X.
It's got my name, Norrie, and it says 6X.
Whether you call it Gender X or gender hybrid, more people like Christina are causing us to question our tightly held ideals of sex and gender.
Hey baby, that looks good.
So imagine how a mother must feel when her son reveals he is no longer her boy.
Nothing much, same old, same old.
I honestly don't know if he's my son or my daughter. I honestly don't know. Listen, nothing growing up or nothing in his young adult life would ever have indicated that he was anything except just 100% alpha male. Chris was the epitome of the football jock, nothing bothers me type macho male.
As a young man, Chris played American football and went on to become a successful bodybuilder. He married and fathered children. No one suspected he had been cross-dressing since he was a child.
I remember being attracted to girls' clothing. I remember one Halloween when we were young children dressing up as cheerleaders, and I just remember really enjoying that more than I probably should have. But it just felt more like I should feel. It felt more comfortable. And so I was battling or doing that all through somewhat middle school and into high school, but I was also ashamed and embarrassed of it because it didn't seem right. And my job, I used to travel. I was traveling all over Texas, and so I was staying in hotel rooms at night. That's when I would completely dress. I had makeup and a wig and literally everything, and I would have it on for a little while, sit in the room, and then go, what am I doing? And throw it all away. And then 6, 8, 9 months later, buy it all again. And I did that, literally that cycle for almost 30 years.
As a psychologist and a gender specialist, I hear a lot of people's secrets. And very often I'm the only person in their life that they share this with. Most people never will go through a gender transition. Most people never will take hormones or surgery or do any of the many things that you can do to make yourself feel better. Because of the prohibitions and the taboos within society, they keep it secret.
At the age of 39, a year after his divorce from his wife, Chris finally comes out to his family.
Are you telling me you're gay? And he said, no. Do you want to become a woman? And he said, well, no, not totally, not right now. And I said, well, then I'm confused. I don't understand what you're telling me. I had never heard the word transgender in my life. I did think that it was probably a fetish. And I said, do you really feel this way? Is this really, really you? Or are you in some group of bisexual lesbians and they've kind of convinced you this is the way to feel?
I think a lot of people misunderstand what variations of gender expression mean. At the most negative end, I think people will see it as a perversion, as a meaningless rebellion, as an expression of psychopathology. Other people will see it as a very positive expression of self, as a step forward for humanity in terms of acceptance of the broad range of what it means to be human.
Although Christina identifies as a woman, she has never been attracted to men.
Well, growing up, I've always been attracted to women, and I'm still attracted to women. I've never been attracted to men. So that's what made this even more confusing growing up, because it wasn't like I felt I was gay or that I was attracted to men and I should have been the opposite sex. I was attracted to women, and I still am today. The women that I would date, of course, at some point I would like to have sex, and I assume they would also. I guess the sex would be more like a girl on girl with a special tool.
In a society that divides people into male or female, heterosexual or homosexual, Christina is not easy to label.
If you don't have a man who's attracted to a woman or a man who's attracted to a man, what do you have? Whether or not she has her penis or not, would sex with her make someone straight or gay? There's no answer to that. It collapses it.
Christina's decision to transition hasn't been easy on her family.
I think the most difficult thing has probably been what it's done to his relationship with his children. It's kind of a strained relationship in that they're a little embarrassed of how he looks. They don't really want to be seen out with him.
One of the things when you start this process to transition is you have to realize you have to prepare to lose everything and everyone.
By choosing to be a hybrid, Christina Bruce makes a huge sacrifice.
My children was the ones that I had to quit going to pick up, quit going to cheerleading, to go into football practice. I'm basically having to check myself out of their lives for a while because they're young, they're still in school. I don't want them to be made fun of by other kids. That's the one thing that, I don't know if I say regret it, I hate it. I hate that they're having to go through this.
Belly button to the spine, legs straight out. We're doing 6 inches. Ready? Let's go up, up.
Christina has resisted social pressures to fully transition to female. She is happy, on the cusp.
Being transgender is a unique characteristic of me as a person. It doesn't define who I am. I mean, I'm a bodybuilder, I'm a business owner, I'm a private pilot, I'm a race car driver, I'm a father. These are the things that define me. Not a label about my sex or my gender or my sexual orientation.
Knees to your chest. Drive it back out.
Christina has embraced gender variance in a terribly grown up, mature, and positive way. She has said, I'm a bit of this and a bit of that, and this patchwork is my unique identity. And I think more and more that's what people need to do, because society will benefit from the expression of diversity.
Breathe in the nose. Are you remembering all this, Darnell? In.
Yes, ma'am. I am so proud of Chris. At first, I can't say I was ashamed. I was shocked, I guess, and I just kind of wandered in a daze. Still, to some point, I don't understand. But my daughter said to me one day, she said, you know, Mama, you don't have to understand to love and accept. Yeah, you're right. I think that was almost a turning point to me, that I was able to go forward from there. You know, it doesn't matter. I kept trying to understand it and figure out why it was this way, and maybe there's not an answer. Maybe you just have to accept it.
As Ashley and Tony take an afternoon stroll, they could be any married couple. Yet there's something so extraordinary about their relationship, it's almost impossible to believe. When they met and fell in love, Ashley was a man, and Tony was a woman. It's a quiet weekend for Tony and Ashley Weeks. At first glance, you'd never know that they have both had a full sex change.
Generally, people don't really notice that Tony and I are transgender. Normally, we're just taken as who we are, and sometimes people are surprised when we let them know.
Yet there are some signs that things aren't quite what they seem.
Most of the time, I do stuff like this. I don't mind doing it. Ashley has a more of a background in doing electrical work.
My father was an electrician in the Navy, and I don't believe that he would have taught me to repair electrical equipment if I grew up female. Tony finds it nice that I'm able to do this sort of thing. He wasn't really taught these things when he was growing up, so we kind of complement each other that way.
They're happier than they've ever been in their lives. But it's been a long road. Tony was born in Texas in 1967 as a baby girl called Gail.
My mom would dress me in dresses and, you know, have ballerina lessons and tap dancing and stuff like that. My mom would try to put the ribbons in my hair and I would yank them out and throw them. So I guess even back then I didn't want to wear ribbons in my hair.
The most common thing that I hear is, by 5 years old, I knew that I was a girl, or I knew that I was a boy. It's sometimes earlier, as early as 18 months, as early as kids being verbal and being able to say, you know, no, I'm not going to wear that.
As an adopted child, Gail felt extra pressure to be the perfect little girl.
They adopted me because they wanted to have a daughter. It really was hard on me because I didn't want to disappoint them and let them down. But yet there was nothing I could do about what I was feeling inside.
1,500 miles away, in California, Ashley was growing up as a little boy, a boy called Don.
I guess when I was about 6 years old, I felt as if I was one of the girls and not one of the boys. I thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't know what, but from a very early age, I knew that it wasn't a good thing for me to bring up.
Gender is very complicated. So when we talk about gender nonconformity, in this context, we're talking about somebody whose internal gender identity doesn't match their assigned gender at birth that's based on their genitals. Those kids have very bad experiences in school and a lot of times at home as well.
For Gail, developing into a teenage girl was a nightmare.
I remember laying in bed at night praying for the next morning when I would wake up for my body to not be the way it was when I went to sleep, when the breast started developing. At that point, I got so desperate that I actually had started cutting myself up because I just hated the body so much. Inside, I felt like I was suffering. I just was trapped.
Things did get very difficult prior to puberty and past. I had a lot of the girls that were very close and wanting to date and this sort of thing, and I felt quite awkward. I didn't feel gay, but I didn't feel right. I knew then that I was transgender.
Transgender is a particularly broad term which could encompass all sorts of variations of gender bending or all sorts of bodies which don't sit with our normative ideas of gender. The terms transsexuality, transgender, and transvestitism are often confused. Transvestitism simply means cross-dressing. Transsexuality is a term to describe someone who has had sex reassignment treatment and now identifies as the opposite sex.
But what makes us identify as either male or female? It's not just about the genitals we were born with. It seems to be a combination of chromosomes, hormones, and psyche.
Gender identity is a core piece of our identity. How it's determined, if it's genetic, if it's... we don't know. We don't know, but it's not a social construct. We see this because people from all walks of life, from every kind of situation you can imagine, every color, every language, experience this incongruence with their internal gender identity.
By the age of 18, Gail had also realized she was transgender.
Best I could do with my parents was I just told them I was gay. I was scared to death to tell them what I really felt. I've been asked the question, well, why couldn't you just settle for being a very butch woman? Well, because that's the whole thing. I'm not a woman. It's, you know, for me in my mind, I'm a man.
For Don, the idea of coming out was unthinkable. He found solace in the Navy.
I took all of my emotion and pain and put it towards meaningful purpose. And I really was interested in serving my country and being the best sailor that I could.
It's not unknown for people pre-transition to throw themselves into societal roles to hide their trans nature. And so I have known trans women who have been living macho lives before their transition as playboys, as lumberjacks, as motorcycle enthusiasts, to try to fight their inner sense of femaleness.
People like Don and Gail are said to have a condition called gender identity dysphoria, or GID.
Complex issues like gender identity dysphoria, transsexualism, is probably a very complicated recipe coming out of both genes and environment. I would be very, very skeptical of any claims for there to be a cure to it, or any claims, in fact, that it needs to be cured at all. Although it seems that people with GID who do transition to the other sex very often find that they're happier.
Trapped in the wrong bodies, in their 20s, Gail and Don took the path towards self-destruction.
I felt hopeless, and how I coped with it is I did a lot of pharmaceutical drugs like tranquilizers along with drinking to just exist.
There's been many times where I felt like I just didn't want to go on. I have had the gun up to my head a time or two. I just couldn't imagine hurting the people that care about me.
After 37 years of living as a male, Don takes the first step in the transition process. He dresses as a woman in public and changes his name to Ashley.
Transitioning process was actually quite terrifying. If someone could imagine going into the other sex bathroom in the other sex clothing for the first time, and it seems like everyone is looking at you. Also that perhaps you could be killed or beaten, as happened to a lot of transsexual people. You know, I'd been to war and it wasn't that terrifying.
The society is not tolerant of men who are dressed like women, which is how a lot of trans women are perceived. The society is not tolerant of it, and furthermore, we make it the basis of a lot of really bad and painful comedy.
Until this point, Ashley and Tony had lived parallel lives. Then in 2003, at a transgender support group, they meet.
Tony came into my life, and we just seemed to hit it off. We really clicked together, and it's hard for me to say how amazing that really is.
With Ashley by his side, Tony begins the second step in his transition, hormone therapy.
Ashley actually gave me my first injection of testosterone. I believe it was January 6th of 2004.
The third stage will reshape their lives forever. Full sex change surgery, together as a married couple.
Well, the first thing they did is they took out all the female reproductive organs. First, they have to form the penis. With mine, it was constructed from the skin on the side of my right side. And it's a normal male-sized penis. You can still orgasm, you can still have that sexual pleasure.
The genital reassignment surgery, what they do is they use the skin from the outside of the penis as a new vaginal lining. And then they invert what used to be the penis and make a new vaginal vault. And the testicles, they cut that away and just basically make new labia. At first, it felt like I had a penis tied in a knot, you know. It was just a really odd feeling, but, you know, at the same time, it works.
While Ashley has her breasts augmented, Tony has his removed.
They actually will take the nipples and cut them down to male-sized nipples, because generally a male's nipples are a lot smaller than a female's.
Ashley has her brow bone and chin restructured to give her a more feminine look.
For me, it was part of feeling that I was in the correct body and that I could look in the mirror and see the person that I felt inside.
In the past, therapy tried to change the psyche to suit the body. It was fabulously unsuccessful. People were tormented by years of useless therapy. Now we realize the psyche stays, the body can be changed.
I have had to learn how to speak a lot more feminine, and it has been a little bit of a challenge.
Well, I think that the voice change has been quite a...
Learning how to speak like this is a little bit, it takes time.
Ashley now works as a peer support specialist, and Tony is about to finish his degree in psychology. It's taken a lot of courage and a great deal of money to get here.
I would say yes, it is worth all the pain that I've had to go through physically and emotionally and financially, because we had to pay for all this, so it was not easy either.
But not everyone who wants to transition can afford it.
Surgery is quite expensive, $12,000 up to $60,000 depending on what's being done. And the question is, can we as a culture afford to pay for it through health insurance, or can individuals afford to pay for it? And those seem to be big, thorny moral issues.
Tony and I both transitioning, it gives us a point of reference to each other's feelings and an insight into how each other may feel. But it's not the biggest part of our relationship. I just love him for who he is, and I have a profound respect for Tony.
It's better than it's ever been because I have this peace of mind that I never had before. I didn't know it was possible to be this comfortable alive.